Right. So, good morning. I hope everybody is staying warm. It's we've gone from 65 yesterday to sub-zero.
Oh, yeah, 72.
Did it go to 72? No. So, it's that time of year where you have to dress in layers because it might be cold at the start of the day and then warm as we go on. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about relationship selling, and then we're going to start with ethics, and I'm going to give you quite a bit of time to answer the questions in your groups on ethics and sales that I will have as a critical thinking challenge. I have opened up a Dropbox for those, and I will talk about when those will be due. It'll probably be due your answers to those on Thursday by midnight. If you still haven't got the other ones in, that's okay. Get them in. I'm going to grade those today, probably after class. So you'll have those grades posted, but let's talk a little bit about relationship selling and the sort of the old model. So we talked about the theories or philosophies of marketing and sales plays a big role in one of the eras. And I think it's really that era of the selling era, the sales philosophy, that gives sales a bad reputation. The one that we have a lot of people saying things like, I want to go into business, I want to get a business degree, but I don't want to be a salesman. In spite of the fact that there's overwhelming evidence that they will go into sales, probably, because that's going to be their first job. And even people who don't get business degrees, they end up in sales. So one of the people that I met who served on a committee as a student was a musical theater major, and that's just such a marketable degree that guess what he's doing? He's in sales. Yeah, he's in sales. Because, you know, a lot of the skills that you learn in theater performance may be applicable to sales, I guess. And so, you know, and there's just not everybody's going to be the next American Idol. So it's important. And I think relationship selling and the way we teach sales now is really, really important. So relationships are now really considered in this era of value co-creation to be the heart of selling, building relationships. There is an age-old adage that says you don't mix business with pleasure. Is that really true? I don't know, because it's important that we build relationships and we build lasting relationships with our clients and our customers, because customers have something called a customer lifetime value. And the idea here behind CLV is that it is much cheaper and easier to keep a customer than it is to prospect for new customers, which is why there are, even now in car sales, they are recognizing this. And there's a car dealer in Dallas who does a good job. You will see his cars in Oklahoma. He is such a popular Cadillac dealer. And your text mentions him. His name is Sewell Cadillac. People will actually buy Sewell Cadillacs in Oklahoma because they have such good customer experiences there. And he says, he wrote a book, and at the time he said the $125,000 customer. And Mr. Sewell says that was the average at the time he wrote the book, that a Cadillac customer would spend over their lifetime in buying Cadillacs from him. And that's actually obviously an old figure, because a Cadillac Escalade, if you buy a brand new one, is what? Yeah.
I think it's like close to 100.
Yeah, they're close to. If you get all the bells and whistles, they're I mean, like the price of a house. Right? So, but then he said, if you take that and what they will actually bring you in business in terms of talking to people and telling them about your product and service, they're actually worth, something like $500,000. So relationships are really, really important. Online sales are increasing, but that doesn't mean that relationships aren't. People are having relationships online with the businesses that they do business with. Right? Technical advanced sales positions are growing, And so new selling is about cultivating these relationships, although the mediums may have changed, about creating value co-creation across these platforms and in the sales environment. So in the old model of selling, which I know it's hard to read, we have what I drew before, the pyramid, which is basically you spend 10% telling, getting their prospects' attention, 20% of your time qualifying, 30% presenting features, and then closing long and hard. We've inverted that, and now it's about building trust and rapport in the approach, understanding the client, understanding how to prospect, getting that client in advance, identifying their needs by using probative questions and listening, and then making the presentation and selling them on business. And if you do all of that, closing shouldn't be that difficult. So we should spend less time with it and overcoming resistance and gaining commitment, and then reassuring them and keeping them as a customer. Now, as much as I say this, there is a caveat. As much as I say there is customer lifetime value, you do not necessarily want every customer. And Amazon recognizes this, and I think I told you this, I alluded to it before. If you send enough stuff back, if you're a Prime member, you get to send stuff back for free, right? If you send enough stuff back and they don't tell you what it is, what the limit is, they will cut your Prime account, and you will not have a Prime account because they just figure you cost too much money. We had a similar experience in my family business. So when we first got started, my family, we moved here, my mother, not my entire family, my mother and my brother and I moved here in 1986. My mother had been recruited by a banker in Guthrie, Oklahoma to start a bed and breakfast. He wanted to develop Guthrie as a tourist town, and he was very interested in that. And bed and breakfast was a big deal in the 1980s in terms of developing that. So we moved here in 1986, and we were the first bed and breakfast in the state of Oklahoma. And initially, we were remarkably unsuccessful because you never want to be the first in something like that. People would show up to our bed and breakfast, and you all will find this funny because you are now used to Airbnb. How many of you have stayed in an Airbnb? Quite a few of you, right? So you know what Airbnb is, so you have some idea. In 1986, Oklahomans had no idea what the bed and breakfast was. And they would show up, they would make reservations, and they would show up and they'd say, well, this is your house. It's amazing to me how much the accent, as more and more people have moved into Oklahoma from outside. But in 1986, nobody moved to Oklahoma. It was the depths of despair and the oil bust, and nobody moved here. And people had a fairly thick Southern, well, this is your house. And my mother would say, well, yes, that's what a bed and breakfast is. You're staying in this lovely old Victorian man. They'd say, I don't want to stay in your house. It's old. It's kind of creepy. So my mother started, we started, trying to make this business survive. So one of the things she did is there were these tour groups that you could get on with that would bring people into town, and they would spend time and they would learn about the culture and stuff like that, and then they'd move on. And they were called Elder Hostel. And the idea was that it was sort of similar to the youth hostels that I had stayed in Germany, where people, the youth hostels in Germany are places that people can go and stay very cheaply, usually young people for the most part, although they're open to anybody. And you can stay and travel, and you can, people did this when I was a kid. They would backpack as teenagers. The German children would do this as teenagers. They'd backpack across the country and stay at youth hostels. The idea in America was, well, we'll get these old people and put them on a bus, and we'll do, it was called Elder Hostel. And the idea is that they learn something, like the youth in Germany and in Europe where they have youth hostels. They backpack or hike or, maybe ride their bikes across the country or travel by car or train. They have good public transportation in Germany. You'd go by train and you'd stay at these youth hostels and learn something. And I did this when I was a foreign exchange student. Well, in America, they started these things called Elder Hostel. And the idea is we'll take old folks, they got lots of time on their hands, and we'll take them on these tours, and we'll take them to places like, the South, and we'll talk about the Civil War and plantation life and stuff like that. Well, Guthrie being a historic place, the first state capital of Oklahoma, well, this was attractive. So we got on and we had several elder hostels that came and stayed in our bed and breakfast. And the idea is they learn about the culture and things like that. We rapidly decided, we stopped referring to them as elder hostels and started referring to them as hostel elders, because old people are mean. and they expect a lot and they want things cheaply, you know, and they were not a good fit for us. So we rapidly ascertained, or as I had a judge tell me, ascertained, that's Oklahoman for ascertained, ascertained that these people were not our clientele because they were old and they were sort of hostile and they were bitchy and they demanded a lot of stuff that bed and breakfast generally can't provide, like, you know, elevators. You know, they wanted to, and in an old Victorian mansion, it's hard to get that elevator, you know, and I guess you can get a stair lift now, but, you know, so we rapidly decided that they were not the clients that we wanted. But generally speaking, you don't want every client necessarily. You've got to figure out which clients you don't want. The clients that cost you more money, you don't want. But outside of that, once you establish a client relationship, you want to keep it. You want to build on that relationship, and that is important. So, keeping a customer and keeping them happy, the lifetime value is really, really important, which means building a relationship with them. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. And this is one of the things where I think we can learn from the ancients. Aristotle talks about this in his treatise on friendship. He says there are 3 types of friendship. And there's nothing priggish about Aristotle. He doesn't say that either of these 2 types are bad, but the 2 types that I'll talk about first are just transitory. Right? So what are the 3 types of friendships that Aristotle says there are? Well, Aristotle says there are friendships that are grounded on pleasure. These are your drinking buddies, right? And these, once the pleasure ends, the relationship usually ends. So Aristotle says the first type of friendship is grounded in pleasure. And when you go to whiskey school because you drink too much, the Betty, they're going to tell you have to change your playgrounds and your playmates. At least that's what I've been told. I've never gone to the Betty. I've never gone to AA, because that's for quitters. But I'm told by people that do, that they tell you this, that you've got to change your playmates and your playgrounds, meaning that once you decide that you can't drink anymore, you can't handle the whiskey, you can't go to the bar, right? Those people that hang out at the bar, you can't hang out with them, and so the friendship ends, right? Nothing wrong with that, just moved on in life. Second type of friendship that Aristotle talks about is friendships that are grounded in utility. Friendships that are grounded in utility. These are friends that are useful. How many of you have a job? Almost every one of you should throw your hands up in the air because you're business students, so you should have a job, right? So you have a job. How many of you have left a job? Okay, a lot of you have left a job. Did you stay friends with everybody that you had at that job that you left? No, by and large, on the whole, you got new friends, right? Those friends were no longer useful. And so you got new friends. That's utility. And that's what our customers are. They're friendships based on utility. The third type is called perfected friendship. And it's where A befriends B, so you've got perfect friendship. Not because they're useful or they get pleasure, but because you actually want what's best for that individual. These are the friendships of a lifetime. And so when we say things, and when there used to be this adage that says, don't mix business with pleasure, I would say that's not right? I mean, you got to recognize that your business relationships are probably not going to become perfected friendships, although they may. But it's unlikely that they will become perfected friendships in which you find the significant other of a lifetime. These are the friendships that you can count on one hand, right? These are the people that will not only bail you out, but will help you move the body. That's the perfected friendship, right? Most of our friendships in business are going to be utilitarian. And there's nothing, Aristotle's not priggish about this. There's nothing wrong with these. You just have to recognize it. So how do we do that? Well, once we recognize that they're utilitarian friendships, it's about making sure that the business provides relationships that create value, continually improve, and you have to create value for both parties. And that's what we look for in the relationships. So the relationship cycle in this. Phase 1 is identifying and qualifying prospects. And again, what we found with the hostile elders is that they were not good prospects for us. So what we did, my mother started writing murder mysteries. She had read that there were a couple of bed and breakfasts in New York that were doing murder mystery weekends, and she was a writer. She was an English teacher, and so she sat down at the computer. We actually had a computer, which was unusual back then. She had an IBM, which actually used these. We have ecos of this left over from the IBM days. So if we go, for example, and let's open up a Word document or an Excel file, we can open up an Excel file. And you go up here to the icon. What is that icon?
Floppy disk.
Yeah, it's a floppy disk. That's what it was. It's the save icon. And this is from the IBM days. We used to have these big floppy disks. They were actually floppy. And you put them in the computer, and that's what you saved everything on. And then they came out with littler ones that were 3x5s that were smaller and were not floppy. They had a hard cover, which made them more durable. But that's how you save things. So we have these vestiges of this on Word and things like that that we use. So she started writing murder mysteries, and we started doing murder mysteries, and we instantly became an overnight success, going from almost business failure to we were booked out like at one point in time 2 years in advance for the murder mystery weekends. So we rapidly identified that these people that we were prospecting, these hostile elders, as we came to call them, were not really qualified prospects for our business for a variety of reasons. One was that they, it's hard for old people to get up the stairs. Old homes have lots of stairs generally, and that's difficult for them. So qualifying or identifying your qualified prospects. So what we started doing is we were at these murder mysteries. Those were attractive to yuppies, to younger people who were looking for something to do on a Friday or Saturday night. So planning your pre-approach activities. Once you find the qualified prospects, planning, how are you going to figure out what these people are? And we'll go through this. We'll talk a lot about this when we talk about social styles. That's a big part of our pre-planning is how do we figure out what the social style is of that individual, or what we think the social style might be, and why is that important? And then in phase 2, we have the approach, the initial approach, where you meet with somebody. And our competitions will focus on this. There will be an initial person that you have to find and get them to buy in, and they're the gatekeeper, right? Discover the needs, and then making your presentation, handling objections, and gaining commitment in phase 2. Then you want to keep them. That's phase 3. So once we sell them, you want to keep them. We've got a new copier. The reason I did not have syllabi to hand out at the beginning of the semester was because our copier was down, because we switched companies. We decided we didn't like the copier company that we were buying copiers from the College of Business. I'm not sure why. And they switched copier companies. But before that, we bought copiers from the same company for about 20 years. It was a long-term relationship. And that involves service. What kinds of service? Well, service quality becomes important. Are we going to have to wait a long period of time? When my mother had a real estate company, and we had this copier, and I think I told you all that I'm just fascinated by copiers. I just think they're the most interesting thing, because they started out, when I was a kid, it was made one copy. Now they do all of this other stuff. In fact, before there were copy machines, there was a machine that made copies that you all have never even seen, but I used to love. I used to love being a teacher's aide because I got to work the ditto machines. How many of you have ever seen a ditto machine? There were these machines that made copies. You made an original on a special kind of paper that was called ditto paper, and then you put it on a drum, and you turned a crank, and the drum would turn, and it would go through these other copies, and it would make copies. And the ditto fluid that was used in that process had a sweet smell to it, which is why I liked it. I liked to smell the ditto machine. So used to that was, so I'm fascinated by copies. Right? So we had this long-term relationship, and we decided that we were going to end the relationship, that we didn't like their service anymore because they weren't coming out. Servicing, when the copier goes down, when the stapler goes out, those kinds of things are important. It's sort of the essence. I need to get my tests. I mean, in a higher education environment, one of the things that becomes critically important is that if I have a test to give today, I need to make sure that I get those copies of that test done.
And being college professors, we have a tendency to put everything off till the last minute, which means that I write my exams right before I'm going to give them. And there's an advantage to that, which means that it's secure. It's not going to get out there and get leaked. But I need to make sure that copy machine works when I need to give exams or when I need to get materials to you. It's important. So service quality is important in that third phase in keeping that customer, providing good quality follow-up service. Coming out, that was one of the problems. The copier would go down and it would take them a day to get out of here. That doesn't work. I suppose if we were, mom and pop's Cubie doll store, it wouldn't be so critical. But when you have, I don't know, we've got 6,000 students in the College of Business, that we got to have those exams. We got to have things when it works. So, service quality, managing those relationships, the customer relationship. And then I give you the example here of Sewell Cadillac, the $1.5 million customer, because they tell people about your service and they bring people in. So continuous quality improvement is important in managing this. Team selling is becoming really, really important. Usually in selling, we only have one salesperson, but in a complex world, it's becoming more and more important that other members of the business, particularly, for example, in the business that I worked in when I was an executive vice president, we had to have our programmers go out and help us sell on the team because they could talk to the IT teams in the school districts that we were selling our product. And so that became really, really important. It became important to have a team approach. And in that, and part of that, and managing those, it becomes important because you then have to ensure as marketers and as salespeople, as the salespeople that are responsible, that you are speaking as a team with one voice, that you are being consistent in what you can deliver in your products and those deliverables and the timetables that you said that you can do it in, that you're speaking with one voice and managing that and ensuring that there is a seamless customer experience across all of those touch points that you have with your partner, with your customer, to create that customer co-creation and co-creation of value. Multiculturalism is becoming important. We are increasingly interdependent. And so as we think about building customer lifetime value, this is something that we need to think about. And how do we do that? How do we provide a consistent customer experience when we're dealing with different and a more diverse, multicultural world? It's a relatively recent phenomenon that, there have been three sort of great movements in the civil rights era in the United States. The first started out with African Americans, the second was women, and the third has been the gay and lesbian movement. That has impacted business, right? Mm-hmm. It's now important. Businesses want to ensure that if they're going to do business with a business, that business has the same respect for values and diversity that they have. If they don't, it can create problems. And so managing this and this increasing interdependence is important. The president tonight is going to give his State of the Union address. You should watch this as business people because this is important. The State of the Union is fundamentally, it will be on tonight, it is fundamentally a marketing statement. This is not what the State of the Union used to be. Historically speaking, presidents didn't go, you all think you know what the State of the Union is, but that's not what it was historically. Historically, presidents didn't go to the House chamber and deliver a live address. That phenomenon really started in 1913 with Woodrow Wilson. There were others that sort of did it, but not to the extent. Historically, what the State of the Union was, is it was much more, Washington's first State of the Union address was much more about a balance sheet approach. It was, we we took in this amount of money in revenues, we spent it on this, we've got these departments that are going, the government engaged in foreign relations and trade with these people, we did these treaties, they're having this kind of impact on things. That's what the State of the Union was. That's not what the State of the Union is today. The State of the Union today is about a president selling his agenda to the United States. And why is this important for you as salespeople? Donald Trump said in his first few years as president, trade wars are great. Trade wars are easy to win. Well, turns out they're not so easy to win. Engaging in a trade war with China is dangerous because they retaliate. And when you disrupt the supply chain, it takes years to recover from that. Years. And he has disrupted the supply chain. He thought we could just flip a switch, we'll just have a trade war. They stopped buying soybeans and they stopped buying and sourcing agricultural products from our farmers. And once you disrupt, that's the hardest thing in marketing to fix is the supply chain. Once you disrupt it, it can have devastating consequences for years. We are no longer capable of being, and the reason that this is important in talking about this in this chapter is as a society, we are no longer capable of providing for all of the needs that our people have on our own. We are not a rock unto ourselves. We are enormously interdependent. The goods and services that you buy, they have increased. Refrigerator prices, appliance costs have increased as a result of this trade war by 20% over the last year. So that $1,000 refrigerator you're going to buy is now what? $1,200, right? I mean, these things are going. So understanding this and managing this in the business is important. And when we think about how this stuff is interrelated in the environmental scan, it's important for us to recognize that and the value that these create and the diversity that we face in this complex world. And managing that becomes really, really important in relationship selling. How do we continue to build those relationships in a world that is increasingly interdependent and increasingly diverse from a business perspective, right? So it's really, really important. All right, any questions about relationship selling? So the pyramid thing is in your textbook. You should know that for an exam. You should know about service and quality, the phases of the relationship. And we'll go through each of these and we'll talk about, prospecting and stuff like that as separate chapters. So we'll build on that. We need to talk about ethics. By the way, there's a typo in the syllabus. As one of your colleagues pointed out to me, you can write this down in history as the first time in history that I've ever made a mistake. That I apparently said that the first exam would be on a Sunday, February 9th, right? It won't be on Sunday, February 9th. It'll be that Thursday. So you can write this down in history as the first time Brandon Geary ever made a mistake and put it out there. So as part of that, getting ready, we need to talk about ethics. So ethics in sales. And why is this important? Well,
is it what? Thursday? Oh.
Yes.
So it's Thursday before or after the 9th?
It'll be after.
Okay. So we
yeah,
saw.
not this Thursday.
Okay.
So it'll be like a week from this Thursday.
Okay. So this is your first mistake ever. Can we not do the exam? I'm just kidding.
I wish that would be.
I was actually going to ask the same question because on the schedule, I think on the schedule you have posted in the syllabus, the dates are off.
Are they? I'll have to look at all of them, I guess. I thought I fixed them all.
I think it said that exam one is on the 10th, which is a Sunday.
No, it's the 9th, which is a Sunday. It says it's on the 9th, which is a Sunday.
Yeah.
So, it will be, so that Tuesday should be the 11th, is that right? And then it will be on the 15th.
if I have.
Yeah, so this should be 11th and the
Right, the exam should be on the 13th. So
Okay.
a week from this Thursday.
So why are ethics in sales important? Well, under that older model of selling, if you were selling snake oil and you were going from county fair to county fair, selling, your elixir to cure everything from baldness to cancer, I mean, the country was growing, people didn't have a lot of way of communicating, you could probably get away with it, move on, and it wasn't necessarily all that important, although I think it still, from a humanistic standpoint, was important. But in an era in which people have the ability, we used to say, and I think I told you this before, but redundancy is good, if people really liked your business, they might tell 3 people. If they really hated your business, they would tell 7 to 10 people. That's no longer true. If they hate your business, they will tell everybody. If they like your business, they may tell everybody as well, but they're far more likely to be motivated if they really hate you. Get on Yelp, read Yelp reviews, right? And they're not going to tell 7 people, 7 to 10 people. They are going to tell the world. If they hate you, they will get on they will get on Yelp, they will get on TripAdvisor, they will get on Angie's List, they will get on Facebook, they will get on everything that they can because it's easy to do now. So Benjamin Franklin was famous for saying honesty is the best policy, and we always put the emphasis on honesty, and Franklin actually put the emphasis on policy. Ethics pays well. People want to do business. Now, I will tell you, as somebody who has a huge background in philosophy, I did not start out as a business professor. I started out as a liberal arts professor, right? I started out as a political scientist. So I used to be in the land of hippy-dippy across the parking lot. So this is the way my academic career started out. I got a bachelor's and a master's, actually 2 bachelor's and a master's in liberal arts and political science and public administration, and my master's in political science. And I started teaching political science. And then I got my law degree, and I was teaching law courses in the College of Liberal Arts over there. And I was the university's attorney. And then most of the law courses in the law program got transferred to the College of Business. And the way I became a marketer was one day they went off what we used to have a pay card, and they went off the pay card. And my colleague, who was in the office next to me, Daryl Gooch, got a huge pay raise, and I didn't. And so I figured, well, I can get me a PhD in marketing. I can do that. And when I got a PhD in marketing, I became a marketing professor, right? So the reason I tell you that is because most marketing professors, we all get PhDs, and what does PhD stand for? What do you think it stands for?
Philosophy.
Doctor of Philosophy. So that's what it is. It's a doctor of, and most of us, with the exception of me, have how many philosophy courses in getting that PhD? 0. Zilch. There are no, in your PhD program, there will be almost no philosophy courses, right? So why is it called a PhD? Well, because fundamentally, it's about developing knowledge. That's what the PhD is about. So you're building on the body of knowledge, but they don't have a lot of formal training. Most PhDs don't have a lot of formal training in philosophy itself. I'm sort of the exception to that because I didn't have a bachelor's in business and a master's in business. I had a bachelor's and master's in political science and political philosophy. So I have a lot of philosophy. So from a philosophical standpoint, and as a former liberal arts person and a philosopher, I guess, or someone who studied philosophy, or at least a public intellectual, I think that you should value these ideas of ethics for their own sake, not just because they do good things. But from the practical standpoint, what I will tell you is that people, particularly among your generation, are enormously sensitive to what they perceive as being corporate social responsibility. and you want to do business with people that you view as being ethically responsible and not harming the environment. That's important. The number one thing, so the Iowa caucuses happened last night, and it's a big nightmare, right? So we don't know who the Democrat winner from the Iowa caucuses is, and that's problematic. I mean, there's problematic things with starting out with, let's take a state and let's start. The candidates have spent a year in Iowa, a state that is in no way, shape, or form representative of the United States. It's 80% white.
92%
Right.
white people are in caucus.
Huh? Yeah.
92% white people
Yes.
are in caucus.
Those that went to the caucus, it was 92% white. That is not at all representative of the United States. In fact, Ari Shapiro of NPR said he knew when Mitt Romney was going to lose because they were at the Iowa Fair. The Iowa politicians go to the Iowa State Fair. Mitt Romney is now a senator from Utah. He ran for president. If you don't remember this, years ago, got defeated by Barack Obama. But Ari Shapiro said, I knew when Mitt Romney was going to lose when we were at the Iowa State Fair and we were on a hayride and Mitt Romney leaned over to me and said, look at that, Ari, look at that out there. That's the real America. And Ari Shapiro leaned over and said, no, sir, it's not. Okay? The Iowa State Fair is in no way indicative of the vast majority of the people in this country are no longer farmers. While there is still a majority of the country that are Anglo, that majority is shrinking. In our own state, Guyman, Oklahoma is minority majority. Right? I was the only Hispanic in Guthrie High School. That is no longer the case. And so this is, these ethics and things of a philosophical nature are fundamentally important because your generation, which is the most diverse generation, is influenced by this. When I started teaching here at UCO, it was 95% white. And the minorities that we did have were largely African American. Or they were exchange students, international students. That's no longer true. Right? You look across this classroom and we've got a lot of ethnic diversity in the classroom itself. And so your generation, from a business standpoint, is very concerned about this. Your generation is enormously influenced by this multicultural world that we live in because you're a multicultural society. And so ethics are important. And so you want to do and support businesses that are ethically sound. At least that's what we're told by people who research on your generation. So the caucus goers that turned out last night, overwhelmingly, this is really interesting. The youngest generation, those people that were, and by the way, in Iowa, 16-year-olds can caucus. So 1630, that young generation overwhelmingly supported who? Overwhelmingly came out for who? Would you guess? Bernie Sanders, the oldest guy in the race, right? And it's because he's the most, liberal.
Biden's old.
And he's the most. Is Biden older than?
Like a year older.
Okay. Well, I mean, he's one of the older candidates. Biden's got like almost no support. The young people all support, and why do they support Bernie? Why are the young people all supporting Bernie? Well, because Bernie's really, really about climate change. He's really about the whole idea that we have to focus on this, and we have to focus on healthcare and things like that. So ethics becomes, for your generation, enormously important. Now, to that end, what I would like you to do is, in your groups, answer this critical thinking challenge, and I'll give you until the end of class today to do this, and we will talk about it on Thursday. What is justice? What does justice have to do with marketing and sales? And as a group, your answer should contain, at a minimum, a thesis statement that answers both of the questions, contains 3 substantive examples that support the thesis, and arrives at a well-reasoned conclusion. So it should be a 5-paragraph essay that you turn in. The paragraphs don't have to be overly long, but you need to have at least 5 paragraphs in your answer. And I will give you the remainder of class period today to do that. And we'll talk about it first thing on Thursday, and I'll hang around here as long as you want to answer questions. I will turn off the live stream at this point. And then I will get those other answers that you turned in last Thursday graded. And I will also put up the video from last Thursday on the D2L site. If I don't get that up, you can always go to my YouTube channel and it should pop up fairly quickly in the stream. So if you missed class, you can always get those and view them after class. All right, so get in your groups, work on this. We'll talk about it on Thursday. We'll hopefully come to some conclusion about what justice is. I will tell you that last semester I had a group that was very indignant that justice had nothing to do with sales. And apparently, I don't think that group liked me very much. They were very hostile in everything that they said to me. And I finally just had to tell them, it doesn't really matter whether or not you like me. What matters is that I like you. And, I'm the one that's going to grade this. So you may say justice has nothing to do with selling. Well, you're wrong. So, that's not the right. I will just tell you that very few things in ethics, I will tell you that that's not the right answer. That's clearly the wrong answer. Right? So I'm going to stop the feed, and you guys can get on in your groups and do that. And I will stick around. I got to run upstairs for 1 minute, but I will be back.